The media and political class are melting down over a punk rocker chanting at Glastonbury.
Well, I thought it was appalling, to be honest.
It does evoke some of the worst moments in human history, shall we say.
People question how on earth could Hitler ever have happened, point to Glastonbury and say, that's how.
Right. Ignorant people who were waving Palestine flags at Glastonbury.
They're being indoctrinated at Glastonbury.
It's appalling, isn't it?
What I found more shocking was the crowd singing along with it.
It's worth reminding ourselves of what the IDF has been up to over the past 2 years. While the Glastonbury Festival was taking place, hundreds of Palestinians, many of them children, were killed by the Israeli military in Gaza. The Israeli military is in no way, shape or form a victim. It's an occupying force which, according to international law, has no right to self-defense, let alone genocide. The IDF stands for the Israeli Defense Forces, but there is nothing defensive about genocide. The Israeli embassy stated that the words uttered on the stage at Glastonbury amount to incitement to ethnic cleansing. This is a regime that is actively ethnically cleansing the Palestinians as we speak. The Israeli occupation forces have been burning children alive in tents. The Israeli military has been sniping children directly in the head. The Israeli occupation forces have been luring starving Palestinians to food distribution centers, then mowing them down as direct policy. The Israeli military filled the car which contained Hind Rajab and her family with hundreds of bullets. The Israeli occupation forces have bombed 36 hospitals. The Israeli military killed 15 paramedics in Rafah as they came to try and help those injured in an earlier airstrike. If our media and political class close their eyes to this horror, we cannot take their crocodile tears seriously. Where is the same respect for the sanctity of human life when Israelis march through occupied Jerusalem and chant? Where is the same respect for the sanctity of human life when Zionists took to the streets of New York chanting? They didn't say death to Palestinian military forces, they said death to Arabs. They are lying about what Bob Vylan said at Glastonbury. Death to the IDF means death to an occupying force which is dispossessing Palestinians and killing them on an industrial scale every single day. It does not mean death to a particular religious group. This campaign has always been about maintenance of the industrial scale killing of Palestinians. It's always been about maintenance of the factory of death. Allow the killing of Palestinians to continue and don't resist. The concept of fighting occupiers is a divine right that throughout history people have practiced. According to UN Resolution 3246, all people subject to foreign occupation have the right to engage in armed resistance. In fact, the vast majority of humanity consider themselves post-colonial subjects. When Palestinians say, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, they are articulating the very same call made by black South Africans during apartheid, that they would have independence from minority supremacist rule. They are making the same argument that Angolans made against the Portuguese. They are making the same argument that the French resistance made against the occupation of France in the Second World War. When it comes to Palestinian armed resistance, the groups practicing it are prescribed by the UK government, which represents 67 million people, the US government, which represents over 330 million people, the EU, which represents 446 million people, and the Japanese government. So altogether, less than 1 billion people in the world are represented by governments that prescribe those practicing armed resistance against the Israeli occupation forces. That is less than 1 in 8 people in the world. The vast majority of humanity are governed by political systems which do not prescribe the fighting and killing of Israeli soldiers as terrorism. Outside Parliament today, there is a statue of none other than Nelson Mandela. He spent 27 years in Robben Island, in jail, in apartheid South Africa, for resisting that system. It has to be remembered that ANC did kill soldiers too. Piers Morgan will compare himself to Nelson Mandela in his struggle for free speech. Why does this speech not extend to the vast majority of humanity who do not view violence against military occupiers as a bad thing? Think about the hypocrisy of the free speech warriors who have been harping on for years and years about how they are the ones being cancelled for what they say. Now lining up to try and cancel these musicians for voicing their points of view. When the Clash said, "I hate the army and I hate the RAF," when the Sex Pistols said, "God save the Queen and a fascist regime," many of the people today deriding Kneecap and Bobby Villain were nodding along and smiling. Why was it okay for their generation to have punk musicians who challenged the status quo and the sacred ideas of the time, but it's not okay for this generation to stand up against genocide? So let's be clear. They can cancel Bob Villain. They can cancel and prosecute Kneecap. They can ban Palestine Action. And they can silence every voice within the English language. But as long as there is genocide, there will always be resistance. This is a classic case where the media is attempting to manufacture consent for a crackdown on what you can say about genocide. At Double Down News, you have the opposite policy in place. Free speech about genocide. Join Double Down News now on Patreon to keep the train running.